Hey everyone, welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking something absolutely mind-bending. We're looking at a literal cosmic blueprint. We're diving into the Bhagavad Gita, specifically chapter 7, verse 4, along with its analysis. And this text, it maps out the exact layers of reality, going all the way from the massive macro scale right down to the atomic micro scale. So, if you've ever wondered exactly how ancient metaphysical texts structure the entire architecture of existence, you are definitely in the right place. Let's get into it.
And this brings us to a really massive question, right? What is the universe actually made of? I mean, modern science gives us the periodic table, quantum fields, all of that. But according to our source text today, physical matter is just the hardware. What if we're missing an entire invisible psychological software running in the background? An architecture that we interact with every single day without even realizing it's part of the material machine.
Okay, section 1. Decoding the material energies. Let's dive right in.
To really understand this framework, we need to go straight to the primary source. Bhagavad Gita chapter 7, verse 4 states, and I quote, "Earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego, altogether these 8 constitute my separated material energies." This is really the core thesis of our explainer today. Notice how it categorizes the basic building blocks of reality. It doesn't just stop at what we can physically touch or see. It blends the physical world right into the cognitive world, treating your mind and, say, the dirt outside your window as parts of the exact same machine.
So, according to this ancient text, the absolute entirety of material existence, literally everything you see, think, and feel, boils down to exactly 8 distinct energies. 8! It's a highly specific master list, but the source neatly divides these 8 into 2 separate categories, which actually really helps us wrap our heads around how this whole blueprint functions. Moving on to section 2, the 5 gross elements.
All right, let's look at the first 5 items on that list: earth, water, fire, air, and ether, which is basically space. Now, the text calls these the gross creations, meaning the gigantic physical stuff. But here's the truly fascinating insight. These correspond perfectly to our 5 physical senses. Think about it. Sound travels through space, or ether. We feel the air. We see form through fire and light. Taste obviously requires water. And smell relates to the earth. This is the tangible universe built specifically for us to interact with and experience.
Which brings us to section 3, the 3 subtle elements.
Now, this is where the blueprint gets really interesting. We have the 5 gross, observable elements, the physical matter we just discussed. But then we have the 3 subtle elements: mind, intelligence, and false ego. The source positions our thoughts and our very sense of identity not as ethereal spiritual souls, but as actual material energies. They are literally the psychological scaffolding of the physical world, and they're all classified under the umbrella of material nature.
Take false ego, for example. In Western psychology, ego is kind of just viewed as a personality trait, right? But in this ancient framework, false ego is a literal energy. It's defined by the concepts of I am and it is mine. Think of it like a VR headset. It's the specific mechanism that tricks the user into believing they are actually inside the simulation. It acts as the anchor that ties a living entity to the material world, and the text states it serves as the hub for the 10 sense organs we use for material activities.
Then there's the mahat-tattva, which is translated here as intelligence. But hold on, this isn't about IQ or how smart you are, not at all. The text describes it as the raw, underlying, undifferentiated building block of the universe before it sprouts into the massive diversity we see around us. You can basically think of it as the baseline code of the material machine itself.
All right, section 4, architects of the universe.
So we've covered the 8 elements, the what of the universe. Now, what about the how? Well, according to the analysis, material nature doesn't just randomly move on its own, it's directed by the energy of a supreme source. The text says this manifests in 3 specific forms, called Vishnu expansions, to essentially manage the creation.
And this plays out in an incredible macro to micro sequence. First, Mahavishnu creates the total material energy, that vast Mahat-tattva we just talked about. Second, Garbhodakashayi Vishnu enters into all the individual universes to generate diverse realities. And finally, the third expansion, Kshirodakashayi Vishnu, diffuses as an all-pervading consciousness, known as the Supersoul. The text notes this consciousness is present everywhere, literally even within individual atoms. I mean, for an ancient text to visualize universal management scaling all the way down to the atomic level, that's pretty remarkable.
Finally, section 5, the ultimate cause.
This highly detailed framework is ultimately used by the source to critique purely materialist philosophies. The text argues that material science basically only acknowledges 10 items, the 5 gross elements and the 5 physical senses. But in doing so, it completely neglects the subtle energies, the mind, the intelligence, the false ego, and most importantly, the ultimate source behind all of them. The Bhagavad Gita, on the other hand, claims to present the complete picture of all 8 separated material energies.
The text specifically addresses rival, atheistic schools of thought too, like Sankhya philosophy. These schools study the external, separated elements brilliantly honestly, breaking them down into 24 specific offshoots. But the critique here is that by only focusing on the mechanical outcomes, they miss the conscious creator. It's kind of like meticulously studying the complex gears of a watch, but refusing to believe there was ever a watchmaker.
Which leads us to the absolute core thesis of the source material. It concludes that this entire material world is merely a temporary manifestation. The absolute truth isn't some impersonal void or just a random collection of physical laws. According to the text, it is a complete energetic person, a supreme architect who actually possesses and directs all of these separated gross and subtle energies.
So I want to leave you with a bit of a provocative thought. If this ancient text is right, if your body, your environment, and literally even your own mind and ego are all simply mechanical, temporary components of a grand material blueprint, what is your true, eternal nature beyond those layers? It's a profound concept, and it really challenges our deepest assumptions about who we are. Thank you so much for joining me to unpack this fascinating source material. Stay curious, and I'll see you in the next explainer.